Hello, and welcome to The Relationship Edge, a podcast where we explore the power of relationships in the private markets. And I'm joined today by Eric Pérez-Grovas, one of the co-founders and general partners of Wollef VC. Eric, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lord. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, likewise. And so I'll start with maybe a selfish question. So I used to work at Bain and Company. I saw that you're a fellow former Bainey, but you also worked at McKinsey, which is a bit of a rival firm. And so I have to ask, what are the main differences that you saw across those two firms?
Of course, that's a question that I get from people actually applying to both firms and receiving offers from both firms. In all honesty, it has been years since I worked in both magnificent companies, so not sure if this still applies, but let me tell you from my experience what I found different. If normally what I tell people is if you plan to do a career in consulting, I recommend more Bain. If you plan to use consulting as a learning platform, I recommend McKinsey. And let me briefly tell you why. My experience at Bain is that they cared more about the person, about the individual. So in the long term, I think that is fantastic. On the other hand, I found out that McKinsey, it's an amazing learning machine, that they had information about practically everything you wanted to learn. And they are very sophisticated on how to teach you the abilities, the process, the knowledge that you need to have. So I will summarize that way. Long term, I will choose Bain. Short term learning experience, by far McKinsey.
Yeah, makes total sense to me. I co-founded 4Degrees actually with the McKinsey alums, so have seen a bit of both styles. And yeah, it's interesting to see that those two firms that have a lot of similarities do have some meaningful nuance across them, for sure. My next question for you. So your Twitter feed is full of books and book quotes. Like if you were to scan down it, almost all of it is like related to one of those things. And so I'm curious what your top 3 most gifted or recommended books are to founders or other investors.
So let me choose 3. The first one is High Output Management by Andy Grove. For me, that is a manual on how to manage a company, and I think every CEO should read it. Another one is The Culture Code, and I'm afraid that I don't remember the author, but something that I have learned as an investor is it's talk a lot about how important is the culture, but the thing is, it is true. I think it's the most important thing as a founder that you're going to do, but it's sometimes difficult to define what is culture. And I believe this book does a fantastic job of telling you what is a high-performing culture and gives specific examples. So that's another one. And as a third one, I will choose, and again, I don't remember the name, but it's a summary of the letters that Jeff Bezos have written in his long careers as Amazon CEO. I believe Jeff Bezos one day, if there was a Nobel award for inventing managing practices, I think Jeff Bezos would win that award. And reading his letters, you learn a lot about how to manage the company. So I will choose those 3.
Yeah, I believe the third is it Invent and Wander. Does that sound right?
Most probably, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, definitely have a lot of respect for Bezos, and I've also read the Culture Code, and I think it's an incredible book. So I'm glad that the some of the books that I'm recognizing are ones you recommend. I'll shift gears a little bit. So you're someone who's had a very wide-ranging career. So we've talked a bit about your kind of prior experience at consulting a long time ago, and then in addition, you've been an e-commerce operator at both Mercado Libre as well as other companies. You founded companies and also multiple funds. As you've gone from role to role, how have you thought about maintaining the network of relationships you've built at each one?
So first I would say that I don't believe I'm a good example of someone that is good at maintaining a lot of relationships. Actually, that is something that I need to learn from people that I've seen are amazing. What I think I'm good at is trying to build very meaningful relationships with the people that I'm working with. And also I've been good at maintaining loose relationships with people that are aligned with what I believe are my long-term goals. And something that I believe is very important with those people that I maintain a loose relationship, I believe I'm very honest in the way I manage the relationship. Like if I need something, I'm very specific of what I need. Like I don't try to pretend, oh, how are you? I'm writing to see how you are. But I'm always very straightforward, telling, hi, I'm writing you because I need a favor. No, and on the other hand, I'm always open for doing favors for loose relationships, and I think that's something that people appreciate. So I'm not sure if that is answering your question, but I do believe in profound and deep relationships. To give you an idea, every time I invest in a company, if they allow me, and normally they do, I will go to all their weekly meetings. Because for me, it is very important that at the beginning of the investing relationship to do that. On the other hand, sometimes it has happened that I have made meaningful friendships with people I have invested in, but I'm very straightforward that's not the relationship. The relationships, I'm an investor and I want the best for your company and I will do that, but I'm very straightforward about what is the purpose of the relationship. Sometimes that evolves at meaningful relationships, but most times not.
Yeah, that makes sense that you kind of make the objective of what you're working for together very clear. But it does sound like you, as you described, prioritize having those sorts of deep and meaningful relationships where they make sense to emerge. I'm curious, maybe if there's any specific large win or opportunity that's come your way as a result of either the loose ties that you've built or those specifically deep relationships that you've curated.
So it comes to mind two different companies. One that is an outstanding success already, that it's Nubank, and one that I believe it's in the way of becoming a fantastic success, that it's called Aviva. In the case of Nubank, I believe what worked was my openness for loose relationship. When David Vélez opened Nubank in Brazil, he had this idea of eventually opening Mexico, and someone referred him to me, and as always, I was open to speak with what I was told was a fantastic entrepreneur. And because of that openness of a loose relationship, when David Nubank started thinking seriously about opening Mexico, they invited us to become investors. And for us, that was a fantastic opportunity to learn more about what it's a fantastic company, and obviously what ended being a very good investment. For those that don't know, Nubank it's a several $billion company listed in the New York Stock Exchange. And that was because I was open in a loose relationship and be open to speak with an entrepreneur, a Brazilian entrepreneur. We don't invest in Brazil, to give you an idea, but I was open to speak with an entrepreneur and try to be helpful if I was. The second example, Aviva, is an investment that we did recently, and it's based on a relationship I built with the people that work at a company that we invested called Confio. But I was always open. When I attend these weekly meetings, sometimes what happens is that the C-level decide that they want to have a relationship with you, no? And they ask, and I'm always open for that. Even if the main relationship and investment is with the founders, I have always been open to have a relationship with people working for the company, and that was the case with Aviva. Phil and David both work at Confio, and when they decided to become entrepreneurs, I believe they will have to confirm, but I believe I was their first choice of an investor. I believe I was their first investor, and it has proven to be for us a fantastic investment. And that was because I was willing to have what was a loose relationship open And now, given that I invested, it has become a profound relationship because, as I mentioned you, with Aviva right now, I go to their weekly meetings and all signals that it's going to be a fantastic investment for us. So those two examples would be the ones that come to my mind.
Yep, and they're both fantastic examples. I mean, if everyone could have a new bank in their portfolio, their lives would be pretty different, right? And so it's very much a story of power of relationships there. I think maybe taking that theme and extending it a little bit further, I'd be curious like how you see your relationships as related to your success as an investor overall. So whether it's the number of deals that you see that come from relationships or other ways that those relationships help support your companies. I'm curious if there are other ideas that come to mind.
So there are so many. I could not have the success, however you want to measure it, that I had if it has not been because of relationships, period. So there are multiple examples. But there is one that it's a bit weird that turned out to be very important for me. So as you mentioned, I worked at Mercado Libre. I founded companies, and then I became an angel, and I started investing as an angel. But when I decided that when I started seeing with my partner Cristobal that there were opportunities that required much more money than what we had, and hence we needed to have funds with relevant investors, it was not easy for me to start getting these first investors. And it's very curious that the way I acquired the first relevant investor was one that I never foreseen. Many years ago, I decided that I wanted to give 1 year of my life to a meaningful cause. And that year, through relationships, I ended up helping a nonprofit, a Catholic nonprofit, that helped establish high-performing schools. I was raised a Catholic, but I'm no longer a Catholic. But nonetheless, the mission for me was meaningful. Helping, in my case, I've been able to have the career I've had because of the education I've had, which I owe to my mother dedication to forcing me always to be good at school. So for me, it made sense to help a nonprofit that was helping kids have a better education. Because of the Catholic component, it was not, in all honesty, and I don't want to go deep into this, but it was not easy for me because I'm no longer Catholic because I have a different vision of life. That being said, I gave it all. That year, I decided. So it was very clear for me at the beginning when I started working with this organization that we differ on some things, but I didn't care because I was there to help kids, and I gave it all. And I don't know if I did a good job or not, but I gave it all. That being said, many years later, when I was raising money for the fund, my first meaningful investor knew about me because of my work with this nonprofit. And I'm sure that he would not have trusted me if it not have been because I had given all in that previous experience. So it's a proof of how sometimes you have no idea what your current relationship is going to end up working in the long term. But in this case, it was like that. Helping a nonprofit helped me get the first investor for my fund. That was extremely important. So that's an example of a relationship that worked out in a fantastic way for me without knowing that it was going to work for me the other way around. I was thinking I was helping them, but it was the other way around. It helped me a lot.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. I mean, everybody talks about how hard it is to get that first anchor LP, and to be able to do that, both because of this prior experience, it is interesting in a bunch of ways. To your point, like it's a story of the importance of giving everything your all, regardless of the circumstances in which you do it, and then also the power of those loose ties, as you mentioned as well. So, really, really interesting. Maybe continuing down the path of like relationship building, I guess I'm curious, are there relationship building practices that you think are undervalued in maybe the venture community overall?
So one is, I believe some colleagues of mine, I'm not going to say all of them, but some colleagues of mine undermine the importance of not only building relationships with the founders, but also with people working in the company. I've seen colleagues of mine go into meetings and disregard everybody but the founders. And for me, as the example I gave of Aviva and other examples, it has worked fantastic for me. Being egoist, it has been helpful. That being said, I believe it has also been helpful for the company, for me to be able to have a relationship with people all over the company, because I'm helping the company in much better ways than if I always have a relationship with the founders. So that is one. I'm trying to think of others, but I believe that's the one that I've been surprised so many times of colleagues of me believing that it is just the founders who are worth having a relationship with.
Totally right. And to your point, so many of those people go off and do interesting things that there's value in maintaining that broader connectivity. Maybe in that lens, given that you've mentioned that you have a lot of maybe looser ties that you're maintaining in different ways, I know you've mentioned in prior interviews you're someone who spends a lot of time thinking about your long-term vision and your personal goals and then instrumenting routines to tie to those. I'd love to hear how you operationalize the practice of maintaining a lot of those loose ties. Like, are there practices you regularly perform or frameworks or approaches you take?
To be honest, not with the loose ties. Like, I have, if you see my calendar, you're going to see that I have a scheduled time always for meeting people that normally 99% that time is more related with the profound times, including my personal ones. Like, I have scheduled personal time with the people I love. It sounds weird, but it is true. If you see my calendar, you're going to see I have dinner every Monday with my son. I have lunch every day. But with loose ties, I believe it's more about thinking on a regular basis about the people that I know and how, in all honesty, it sounds crude, but how they can be useful for my long-term goals of helping the companies. So I've connected entrepreneur with so many different people, and I believe people appreciate that I'm straightforward about, as I told before. I think a practice that I believe has helped me is being always straightforward. On the other hand, but it's not a process. It's basically a way of being. Like, if you see the subjects of emails I've sent, is I have a favor to ask. That's my subject. I don't expect people, and I don't know how, but I do have shown that I'm always open, always for any sort of conversations. But again, I don't think I'm a good example of how to maintain loose. They're just there. Why? I don't know. But once I remember this French guy wrote me and said, "Eric, I need to meet you." And said, "Oh, okay. Why?" Because this other French guy living in Brazil told me you are the most honest person I can speak with in Mexico, and I want to meet you. I said, "Okay, let's do that." Why? I don't know, but there's no process. I would love to tell you. I think my main characteristic is I'm very straightforward with my relationships.
Yeah, and honestly, even if it's not a process, it clearly has worked for you, even in terms of the sorts of success you've been able to drive, and people appreciate others who are straightforward and genuine and who will tell them the truth, especially when so many people won't. So definitely is a strategy of its own, even if it's not necessarily a conscious one. Well, fantastic. And so maybe my last question for you, and it's our traditional closing question here on the Relationship Edge, is what's the single biggest lesson you think you've learned about relationships and relationship management that most people get wrong?
I think it's about being open about emotions and who you are. As I mentioned before, I struggled a lot to raise money for our first fund. Our first fund, it took 2 years to raise the fund. The second fund, it took a year, and the third fund, it took 2 weeks. And a very important lesson for me was that I didn't understood the value of being open and straightforward about what my story is, my personal stories. When I started raising the first fund, my pitch was, and obviously it's very important, but there's a huge opportunity in the digital economy in Spanish-speaking Latam, and I have the experience to invest in the good companies, no? Which both things were true, but I was not connecting with people. But basically what I was doing is I was selling a product, some people buy it, some people don't. What changed dramatically was understanding that I needed to tell people who I was. And a very important part of who I am is I'm the son of an entrepreneurial mother. And that defines a lot of my life. And now I start my conversations with that it's very meaningful for me, very important for me, and it's the reason that I do what I do. And I learned that people care more about that the size of the digital economy and my professional experience. Obviously, they care about that. They will not invest in me if those two things were not true. But they cared more about speaking with someone that was being truthful about who he was, and more important, why he was doing what I'm doing. So that for me has worked a lot, being straightforward about who I am. And also that had transformed in people being open of who they are with me, and they know that I will treat their stories with all confidentiality, but also that has helped me build a strong relationship both with investors and with entrepreneurs.
No, it's fantastic. One of the quotes I've been meditating on recently is a simple one, but it's the best story wins. And it very much aligns with the view you just described of how important it is that other people know you and know your story. And so you today have demonstrated that you're a phenomenal storyteller. And so we really appreciate how you've approached this conversation. And so, Eric, again, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. For those who are listening or watching and they want to be able to learn more about you or the firm, where can they find you online?
So the easiest is Twitter or Threads. That's the easiest way for me. And for entrepreneurs looking for a meeting, the best way is through an entrepreneur I have already invested at.
Yeah, to the point around relationships. Well,
yes.
Eric, you're right. Well, Eric, again, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate you joining us and looking forward to keeping our relationship going.
Same was uploaded. Thank you very much.
Thank you.